Hello everyone, this is Chris with the Colorado Academy of Cosplay. I am going to discuss what tools you need for making cosplays out of EVA foam. There aren't a whole lot of tools that you actually need. There is a whole bunch that you could have, kind of things that make your life a little easier or for specific techniques or effects that you want, but as far as the things that you absolutely need, there aren't that many actually. So let's begin. First off, you need, number one, is a knife, and it's not any knife. It's a good knife. So we're not talking a box cutter or kitchen knife or anything like that. This is the type of blade that I personally use, obviously, but this is a telescoping snap-off blade with a 25mm wide blade. I like this because you can get a lot of blade out of it. I actually use a lot of it versus most box cutters. You only get about that much, and when you're working with foam can be pretty thick depending on which size you're using. So you actually need more exposed than that. 25mm thick is also really good, as it makes it stronger, so it's much less likely to break as you're flexing the blade. I've actually had that do on the very first blade that I ever used was a much thinner blade, and it just snapped on the first use. So a good sharp blade. Second, and absolutely critical, is a good blade sharpener. This is a diamond whetstone. You can't use sandpaper, you can't use rocks, you can't use a kitchen steel. None of that will sharpen your blade well enough. And I go over that in detail in a different video as well. But a good blade sharpener, diamond whetstone or whetstone or similar type like that. Another type of blade is an X-Acto knife. Most of you are probably pretty familiar with this type of blade. So this is for getting a lot of the finer, more detailed cuts. And you can also use, of course, the diamond whetstone to keep that nice and sharp. Simple tools: a black Sharpie, a silver Sharpie, and a pen. So these are good for just when you're tracing your patterns or templates out in your foam. You're going to need something like that. Another tool that you're going to need is a ruler, and not just any ruler, a metal ruler. And the reason for that is when you are cutting your foam, you're using the metal ruler as a guide. It's not so much as measuring things. I mean, there are times when you're going to use it to measure, but you use the ruler as a guide for making straight cuts, whether it's straight or angled or whatever, but you're using it as a guide. So when you're cutting along the ruler, if it's made out of a material like plastic or wood, you're going to end up slowly shaving that ruler away. So a metal one is absolutely crucial for that purpose. Another critical, and you will not get very far without this tool, just like a knife, is a heat gun. Not a dryer, not a hair dryer, but a heat gun. Now, this is used for two different things. One, for what's called heat sealing the foam. Foam it's got a lot of pores in it, a lot of cells, and when you apply heat to it, it closes up a lot of those cells. So foam absorbs anything that you put on top of it. So if you were to, say, paint a coat of whatever on top of an untouched piece of foam, it's going to absorb a whole bunch of that. Now, if you heat treated it with a bunch of heat from a heat gun first, less amount of paint is going to get absorbed in that. It also helps protect it a little bit too, but there's other things. So, but the other and even more important reason we use a heat gun is to form or shape the foam. So when you try to form it with just your fingers, it's going to want to go right back to the shape. But if you heat up the foam first and then hold it in the position or shape you want it and let it cool, it will stay in that shape permanently. So that is how you get round shapes or complex shapes like this. This kind of thing, these shapes, all of this is not possible without a heat gun. You have to have a heat gun. And it has to be, again, it has to be a heat gun and not a hair dryer. A hair dryer cannot get hot enough. And you can get, this is actually a nicer one. It's got a little temperature dial. It can go from pretty cool. So this is like, I mean, you could stick your hand right in front of it and it's fairly cool, but then jack it all the way up to high and this will burn the skin off your hands. So, but anytime I'm working with it, I usually have it around about that setting. So it's pretty darn hot is what you need. Another thing that you need, it's not really so much a tool, but you of course have to have an adhesive. You have to have a way to adhere all of your pieces of foam together. And you do that, there's three different types of adhesives you can use. One is hot glue. Hot glue I use more for like details or hard to reach spots, things like that. But hot glue is difficult to work with. It takes a long time to dry. It's messy, and it can get very unattractive. You know, if you try to build your entire cosplay out of using hot glue, it gets pretty messy and it's not as attractive as it could be. Then there's super glue. Super glue works pretty well, but again, I only use that on fine details. They come in really small bottles and you're gonna end up using a lot of it. And it does hold pretty well, but it's not quite as flexible. But the type of adhesive that is most ideal for overall cosplay for EVA is contact cement. So this is a specific type called DAP Weldwood. You can get this at the Home Depot or Lowe's, or I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of other places you can get it, but it comes in different sizes. So this is a little glass jar, and it's got a little, it's got a little, I mean, you can kind of see it in there. It's got a little brush that's attached to the lid. These are pretty nice for small projects, but I found that you can't use all of it just because it tends to dry up, and the brush inside tends to wear out, or it kind of just falls apart before you even can use it. But more importantly, because I mean, this is only 3 fluid ounces, and it was like, I don't know, $5 or $6. You can get a bigger jar. You can get like 8 times more glue for maybe $15, and just using a chip brush or something like that. So, but contact cement is what you use. There is also another type called barge, but barge is pretty hard to find around here. But contact cement is what you need. Another tool, it's not necessary. It helps in a lot of projects, particularly when you're making props and shaping things, is a Dremel or a rotary tool. A lot of people use these to make bevels, or bevel is basically, instead of a flat edge like this, it's more of an angle. A lot of people use a Dremel for that purpose. I personally think that's a bit messy and unnecessary. You can just use your knife and just angle it and you're done. But you can carve things out of it. I've made a lot of props doing that method. Things like, for example, the rock formation on here, I used a Dremel shaping the blade out of this pickaxe. I needed the Dremel for that. There's a lot of things to use Dremel for. Health and safety, absolutely necessary. A respirator or face mask of some type. At the very bare minimum, you want particle filtration. Anytime you are Dremeling EVA foam, it kicks up a lot of dust, and that stuff will get, see, there's some right there. That stuff will get in the air and you will breathe that in, and that stuff is not good for your lungs, people. So you want, at bare minimum, particle filtration. Now, if you're working indoors, you are going to want something more of a organic compound, organic chemical filtration system. So with the Black Band, it's a 6000 series respirator. That will help save your lungs from the fumes from contact cement. So now, if at all possible, absolutely keep the windows open, make sure there's good circulation in your house. But you know, if you can, do it outside. I understand if it's like winter and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to do that, and it does affect the drying time and, you know, quality of the glue if it's, you know, 2 degrees outside, obviously. But if you're doing it indoors, absolutely need a 6000 series or better respirator for the fumes. You need eye protection, particularly when sanding or dremeling. Basic glasses style is not sufficient. It's got to be one of these kind of full coverage type of safety goggles that you use in chemistry class in school. And the reason for that, again, that foam dust will get kicked up into the air, and it will just get in any crevice or whatever that it possibly can. So even with full coverage, there's still some dust inside these things. And this stuff, if any of it gets in your eyes, it is not fun, let me tell you. I've tried to be a little impatient and just do a quick Dremel without the goggles on, and just don't do it. Okay, so, all right, so to sum up, so, okay, the things that you absolutely have to have if you want to get anywhere with EVA foam cosplay: a metal ruler, a good knife, you need a proper blade sharpener, like a whetstone or diamond whetstone, some permanent markers, a pen, an adhesive, heat gun, and some safety equipment. Okay? And you don't, I mean, this is nice. You don't have to have it, but it's pretty nice. So all this stuff costs probably, I think it was maybe about $100 for all of that, maybe less. I mean, like I said, the heat gun this is a little bit nicer. You can get one for about $20. This blade's like 15, yeah, so it's $100 or less. You can buy all this stuff. This mat, this is a self-sealing cutting mat. You can get that at Joann's or a hobby store like that. This will save whatever surface you're cutting on. These things last forever and ever and ever. So if you're able to absolutely invest in a cutting mat, this is a pretty small one. I have a much bigger one down in my shop. But not necessary, but absolutely nice to have so you can save your furniture. So if you guys have any questions about any of these tools that I went over, where you can find them, or maybe even some substitutions, absolutely let me know in the comments below the video, and thank you very much for joining.